As a scout leader, we should all strive to perfect our communications to the best of our ability. And now you're in for part 2. Hey, ScouterStan, let's go into part 2 of communications. Communications is a huge subject, and I just couldn't put you through such a long subject in one episode. So we split it in 2 parts. The first part, we literally got talking about being clear in our communications. It's so important to not only be heard, but to be understood. Using positive language so that there is no barriers is important. Being aware of nonverbal clues that could actually, those cues can actually cause a lot of problems in being understood. Being aware of nonverbal cues that can actually be very distracting from the message. Checking for understanding is important when communicating. Adapting your message towards your audience is also a critical part of communications. And finally, we wrap that first segment up with visual aids. That is super important when you're communicating with your scouts. Now let's get into practicing active listening. The first big step to that is that the listening part needs to be making eye contact and thinking about the words that are being said. Trying to avoid any interruptions, either from people in the audience or even things that are in the room, such as a fly or the clicking of a clock. These can be distractions from what is actually being said. After listening, it's important for that person to have a moment to reflect, to think about what they've heard. That is the active part, is being able to receive the information undistracted, directly, and then be able to work out what was actually communicated. Now, if there's any questions when you've heard the communication, if there's questions, you could rephrase it. Say, so what you are saying is, that is the part where you're reflecting back the information that you received. There are so many youth today that cannot make eye contact. That is something they cannot do. And when they are not looking at the instructor, the teacher, the coach, they're not listening. That's the key. As a presenter, when you are talking, you want to be able to look at them and see that they're receiving the information. That's the critical part of communications. Make sure that the recipients, the scouts that you're talking to, are receiving that information through participating in active listening. Very critical scout skill. Being open to feedback. That is one thing that we touched on last week when we talked about feedback. Sometimes people take it as criticism. Don't. It is important that you, as the listener, are able to convey your feedback to the person who gave the instructions, that they understand that there is that gift of feedback. So many people do not give feedback, and it's a gift. It's a gift for the presenter, somebody who is presenting, getting that feedback, that communications going. So critical in communications that it cannot be understated. It is important for scout leaders to constantly think back on all of their communications training. This training is so critical to getting that information out there that it should be an ongoing, continuous endeavor for every scout leader. Now, often we talk about wood badge when we talk about feedback and feedback being a gift. If you're interested in wood badge, I highly recommend the highest level of training there is in scouting for scout leaders. So check out that video. That'll start you on the path towards getting those beads. Now, in that, training is key. This is very important for communications. Choosing that perfect moment to say the right thing is critical in communicating a message. And it works the other way. So if a person is tired or worn out or just can't listen anymore, they've heard so much and have so much information, overwhelmed, it's not the best time to give positive feedback. That's one of those things that scout leaders need to understand. So that it has to be at the right time with the right message. Being timely in your communications is important. If you're having a meeting directly after a campout, that is the best time to come up with roses and thorns or the things to keep doing, things to not do. Those are the meetings where you want to communicate as a group and work things out. You want to do that as soon as possible so that all of what happened is in their memory and they can look back at it and find out where the highlights are of what they want to keep doing, what they want to stop doing. Start and stop, there's a lot of different units do different things about that. That should also be for the adult leaders. If you have a training or you have you're doing some recruiting, you need to do an after action meeting so that you can actually go through what we should continue to do, what worked well, what didn't work so good. These are things, and that perfects you towards that goal of being able to communicate. Hey, before we go any further, I want to make sure that you are invited to come to the live meeting. The live meeting is on the first Sunday of each month at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So please join us. Now, you're going to have to adjust for whatever time zone you're in. But please join us and join in. That's a great way to ask questions, and I'm there to answer them. Also, I want to personally thank all of the patrons on Patreon for their continued financial support. Also, if you would like to become a channel member right here on YouTube, hit the join button and go through that process. It's a great way to help fund what you see here. If you don't want to do a monthly donation, that's fine. We have a thank you button. Just hit the thank you button and make a one-time donation. That is always appreciated. And let's get right back to it. Follow-up. Communication needs that moment where you go over what has occurred, what information has been conveyed to the scouts or the scout leaders or parents. That information needs to be followed up with. Sort of a review, and it should be as soon as possible. You cannot wait. That is a critical part of communications. Now, it's important that leaders understand that sometimes they may not be able to follow up immediately, but right after the meeting, right after the recruitment, it's important that leaders get a hold of those new parents either through a phone call or some kind of email, something. They should be able to basically ask for feedback and any clarification or any kinds of concerns they may have. That is important to follow up on what is conveyed at the recruitment. This is true for campouts, it's true for fundraisers, it's true for any function within scouting. Communication tools in scouting. There are some that are absolutely critical. The Be a Scout website, okay? This is very important that you keep your unit up to date. This is a huge communications tool that's used through recruiting year-round and all of the things that connect your unit to the community. So you need to make sure that the key three of your unit have access and keep it up to date. Information that's not up to date is not helpful. The second big one that a lot of units use are walkie-talkies or different devices. They might use something, an app online for like a phone or something. This is good for communications, but it can be distracting. So it should be used appropriately. And those who transmit and communicate through that type of device, they should be responsible in their communications, short and to the point, and make sure that they get feedback that everybody got the message. So that is very critical to communicate through apps and devices. So if your unit is using those, that's something to keep locally. Now there are a lot of tools and apps that are out there that have to be looked into by the adult leadership. There is a critical point to making sure that YPT is always maintained. There should be two deep leadership whenever you're communicating with youth. That is a critical thing to keep that YPT, which is Youth Protection Training, to keep that in mind throughout any communications. Now, communications with different age groups, that is something to also keep in mind. Like I said earlier in segment 1, part 1, the communications with the tigers in a Cub Scout pack is different than the Eagle Scouts in a patrol in a troop. So it's a different type of communication. If you were to use the same communication with the tigers that you do with the patrol, they're going to not listen because they are being talked down to, okay? That's not good. They don't like being talked that way. If you use the same communication that you have for them, for the tigers, they're not going to understand. They don't know a lot of the terms, the words that are being used. So you have to gauge what you say according to your audience. That is so important in communication. The critical part of communication is being heard. A lot of people listen, but they don't hear, okay? And that is very aggravating, and it's disappointing with a lot of youth. They can be distracted, they can be occupied in different things, they want to go a different direction, and get that eye contact. That's a first step. Get that eye contact. Even when you're dealing with a group, make sure you're moving around and looking around and focus on your group. That is so critical to understanding that communication. It's a two-way thing. It is very it's there. And that is something that so many scout leaders just miss out on. And it's important that you keep looking for different things about communications, different classes and courses, wood badge. There's so many things out there. And keep learning, keep going. No one's a perfect communicator. That's just the human condition. And it's one of those things. But you do so much for scouting. And I am so proud of you and everything that you do for your scouts. And just listening through this two-part series and getting involved in scouting and trying to be the best leader you possibly can, that's awesome. I am so proud of you. So keep up that good, hard work. And I really do appreciate it. Now, if you missed it, okay, right up there is part 1. Okay, so till next time, I'll see you on the trail.